Here is a quick video on the respiratory system. I know that your quiz is due on Saturday and didn't know if you needed a video or not, and somebody requested one, so I'm going to hurry and go through a video on the list of terms that's on the respiratory system. So let's start with the sinuses. So we have paranasal sinuses, which you can see surround the nasal cavity. That would be this area here in gray with the turbinate bones. And then the sinuses are mostly to lighten your head and your skull and to allow your voice to resonate so that it can carry farther. It does a little bit of warming and moistening the air because air will go up into the sinuses. But it's not, they're not for drainage or anything like that, because usually if there's drainage, it's because you got an infection in the nasal cavity and went up into your sinuses and then came back out. So you have 4 sinuses, the maxillary, and each one is going to be found in the appropriate bone. So maxillary sinuses are here in the maxilla bone. The frontal sinuses are here in the frontal bone. The ethmoidal sinuses are more like air sacs, but they are clustered here above the nasal cavity, or above the nasal cavity and surrounding the nasal cavity. And then the sphenoid sinus will be back here in the sphenoid bone. All right, so there are the sinuses. Okay, now conducting zone structures are those structures that carry air down to the respiratory zone structures, and respiratory zone structures are those that actually do the gas exchange. So if we start with the nasal cavity, we go. The nostrils, of course, it's the passageway into the nasal cavity. So this whole thing is nasal cavity. And then, let's see if I click on, there we go. Okay. Oh, just get rid of that. Okay, good. Oh, and then I can draw. Hang on. Let me draw stuff let's make it green and thin. All right. Okay. So so there's our whole nasal cavity. The nasal septum would be in front of this, would be covering over the nasal cavity. We can see the nasal septum is right here in the center. That divides the nasal cavity into 2 parts. Why do we want the nasal cavity into 2 parts? Is because we want to warm, moisten, and filter the air, and we want as much surface area for that, for the mucous membranes to cover. And so we also have turbinate bones or conchae to create that surface area. So here are the turbinate bones. So we have a superior and a middle and an inferior nasal concha. And so these are scroll-like bones. As we go back to this view, you can see how they curve out. So this bony part right here. So the white, I mean, the gray is the empty spaces, but the flesh-colored stuff is the bones themselves. And so you can see how they curve around. So superior nasal concha, middle nasal concha, and then inferior nasal concha. All right, underneath each one of the scroll-like bones, we have a meatus. So we have a superior, middle, and inferior meatus. And if you remember from 201, a meatus is a canal. So we have almost a full canal, especially down here in the inferior nasal concha. And so the air will pass through this meatus, and on its trip through the meatus, it'll be warmed, moistened, and filtered. Posterior nasal aperture is the same as the internal nair, in case I put that on the list somewhere. So the internal nair is just the internal nostril. So it's the passageway, the opening from the nasal cavity here down into the nasopharynx. All right, now in the nasopharynx, there's only one. So the nasopharynx, we'll just draw a little line. This is about where it stops. And the nasopharynx is then this whole area where air is going to pass down into the back of the throat. This opening right here is the opening to the auditory tube that goes up into the middle ear canal where the ear ossicles are. And this is when your ear pops. It's because you're equalizing the pressure through this tube right here. Here is the Here's the pharyngeal tonsil that's up in the top of the nasopharynx. This is sometimes referred to as the adenoid. All right, so that's that. So we'll go to the next picture. Let's get rid of that. And go to the next. And now we'll look at the pharynx. Actually, we'll look at this picture first. Okay, so the pharynx is divided into 3 regions: the nasopharynx, the oropharynx behind the oral cavity, and the laryngopharynx, which is behind the larynx. So now we're going to look at the structures that are in there. And we'll do this same thing we did before. All right, so the oropharynx, here is the hard palate right here. Here is the soft palate. And at the base of the soft palate, this area right here, this little hanging down thing in the back of your throat is the uvula. On either side of the uvula will be the palatine tonsil right there. And then lingual tonsils are back here at the base of the tongue. When you have your tonsils out, we'll take out the pharyngeal tonsil, we'll take out the palatine tonsil, but we will not take out the lingual tonsil. All right, so the oropharynx is going to go from about the level of the soft palate and the uvula down here to the level of the epiglottis. And then the rest of this is the laryngopharynx, which is going to be opening into the larynx. So we'll look at the sagittal view of the larynx, and then we'll look at an anterior view. So the larynx is this whole area that's the top of the esophagus. No, it's not. It's the top of the trachea. So here's the thyroid cartilage right here. And the epiglottis is this little flap right here that keeps food from going down the wrong tube. The glottis is this opening right here on top of the vocal cord, or well, between the vocal cords. And then we have 2 sets of vocal cords or vocal folds. So we have vestibular folds, which are false vocal cords that are up here. And then we have vocal folds, which are true vocal cords, which are here. And I'll show you a picture of that now. So let's go to the anterior view of the trachea. And here is the trachea from the front. So here is the here's the thyroid cartilage, all of this right here. Here is the epiglottis, you can see up there at the top. And then the glottis will be the opening into the trachea. Now, if we take a look at a posterior view of the larynx, oh, I don't think we have a posterior. We just have a sagittal view. So let me find a posterior view. Okay. Oops. Oh, that's what I want. Okay, this will work. If it will come into focus. Okay, well, this is good enough for what you guys need. All right, so here are the vestibular folds, or the false vocal cords, or they call them the ventricular here, but they're just folds that are from the side here that extend towards the glottis. So this would be the glottis right here. And then here are the true vocal folds that come down like that. And if we look at where is it? This diagram. Actually, let's look at this one. Okay, so here is the glottis, this opening inside of here. So see how this says glottis right here, or this glottis is the opening into the trachea. Here's the epiglottis here. Here's a lingual tonsil up there. Here's the vestibular fold on the side. So it's going to fold in. Let me show you what it does. Let's use blue because that'll show up. So it's going to come around and then fold back around that way. and come around and then fold in on itself. So those are the vestibular folds or the false vocal cords, and then here are the true that stick out, and then these are, of course, the ones that are vibrating in me because I'm speaking right now. Here you can see there is that distance, that little separation between the vestibular folds and the true vocal folds. But here are the, so this is when I'm not speaking. They're apart like this, and they're not vibrating as I breathe in. But when I breathe out, then they're closed, and so then they'll vibrate back and forth to produce the sound I make. Okay, so there is the upper respiratory tract. Still conducting zone structures, all of these, but that's the upper respiratory tract. So now we're going to go into the lower respiratory tract, and we're going to look at the bronchial tubes. So this is the bronchial tree, and definitely have to use a different color. Let's use not pink. Let's just keep with green. All right. Okay, so here's the trachea. It's right there. And then the trachea is going to branch into two branches. And these two branches, the left main primary bronchi, go to the lungs. Okay, so this is going to go to the left lung. This is going to go to the right. So the this right primary bronchus, take this one over here, this is going to go to the right lung. All right, now in the left and right lungs, you'll notice that they are not uniform. I have a superior lobe on the left side, I have an inferior lobe on the left side, but on the right side, I have a superior and inferior as well, but I also have a middle lobe. So I need 3 branches. Oh, why does this always do this when I'm recording? So I need 3 branches that are going to go to the lobes of the lungs. So I have lobar bronchi. So this is going to be one. So this is going to come here. That's one lobar bronchus. Here's a second lobar bronchus. So this would be 1 right here. This would be 2 right here. So I have 2 lobar bronchi on the left, but I have 1, 2, and 3 lobar bronchi on the right. So these are, I should probably do it in a different color. So this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. There. Okay, I'm going to switch colors, and I'm going to do orange. All right, now coming off of the secondary bronchi are the tertiary bronchi. Oh, I didn't give you the other names. Okay, so right and left primary bronchi, also known as main. Okay, so main primary bronchi. Then secondary bronchi are also known as lobar bronchi. Either term is fine. And then the segmental bronchi are also known as tertiary bronchi. So there are 10 bronchopulmonary segments in each lung. So I'm going to have, let's see if I can get this right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I'm going to have 10. This one's going to be easier because it doesn't subdivide quite as much. Okay, so then off of this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Somehow like that. Anyway, I'm not too worried. Just know that in this diagram right here, as far as the counting them, okay, we've got the primary are these first branches off of here. The secondary are this one, and then this one, this one, and this one, and then everything else is going to be tertiary or segmental bronchi. All right, now when we get down to this point, well, we'll take this one right here. Okay, when we get down to this point right here, so here and here and here, it's looking like there, and then actually way up in here as well, we lose cartilage. So you can see on each one of the each one of these in the trachea and in all the bronchi, they all have rings of hyaline cartilage. They're all bronchial cartilages. And their job is to keep the trachea open, but they don't connect in the back. They're C-shaped, so they allow some expansion of the trachea, but we don't want them to collapse. And we're going to have them all the way through down to the tertiary bronchus level. Then beyond here, these guys right here trade their cartilage for smooth muscle, and they then become bronchioles. Okay, so then these are all bronchioles. Now, the bronchioles are going to keep branching and branching and branching and branching and branching and branching many, many times until we get to the very end where the leaves are going to be, like on a tree. And those leaves on the end of the tree are going to be the respiratory units or the respiratory zone structures. So we'll take a look at this picture right here, and we can see coming off of the terminal bronchiole. So here's the terminal bronchiole. Let me color that. Make it purple this time. Okay, so here's my terminal bronchiole. So at the end of the terminal bronchiole, you can see we have respiratory bronchioles. There would also be a respiratory bronchiole down here if we didn't cut it off. Okay, so it's at the end of the tree where all the leaves are. So the respiratory bronchiole is going to have an alveolar sac on the end of it. Okay, so here's our alveolar sac, this whole section with these little alveoli. And in the middle of the alveolar sac will be an alveolar duct. Okay, so here are the alveolar ducts coming off of the respiratory bronchioles, and the ducts will lead to the alveoli. So each one of these is an alveolus. And you'll notice they're also connected with one another, so airflow will keep going. So once it comes into here, then it'll travel to here, and then it can go here, and then it can go out. Where's the one that goes to here? Out here, and then over to here. It must have come from somewhere else. Anyway, oh, some of these little holes. So all these little holes are all little openings between the alveoli so that the air can move from alveolus to alveolus. Here would be a respiratory bronchiole right here. This would be an alveolar duct. And another alveolar duct right here. Another alveolar duct. Okay, and then that would lead to all of these alveoli that are right here. And those three things together, respiratory bronchiole, alveolar duct, and alveoli, are the respiratory unit or the respiratory zone structures. Okay, went through right lung having superior, middle, and inferior lobes. Left lung has superior and inferior lobe too. So there's the division between the superior lobe up here and the inferior lobe down here. And then lastly on the lung, notice that there's this scooped out area on the left lung called the cardiac notch. And that cardiac notch, of course, is for the heart to sit in because it goes off to the left. All right, now where do we want to go? We're going to go to the pleury. Let's go to this one. Okay, so if you take a cross section through, I'm going to get yellow this time. Maybe. Yellow. All right. So we have the serous membranes that are associated with the lungs, just like we have pericardium with the heart. We're going to have pleury with the lungs. So we have visceral pleura, which is this that touches the lungs. Remember, visceral always refers to the body organ. So this is visceral pleura here. Then I'm going to have a thin space right here, or cavity in here, which will be the pleural cavity. It just shows it a little bit better. And then lastly, I have, so there was visceral pleura. Now I have my parietal pleura, which is right here. And comes around and touches the body wall, because remember, parietal means on your body wall. And it'll go there on the inside of your thoracic cavity. Okay, don't know that we need to look at a picture of the muscles of ventilation. Well, let me see if I got one. Hi, Dwayne. Hi, okay, well, I sort of do. Oh, yeah, I do. Let's look at this picture right here. All right, so here's the diaphragm. Goes up under your rib cage. And so we're looking at what's going to happen with inspiration, what's going to happen with expiration. So here is the diaphragm moving inferiorly during inspiration, which means it's flattening. You can see it's going down this way. Okay, and then when we expire, that when our diaphragm relaxes, it moves upwards like that. Okay, and then here my intercostals, when my external intercostals contract, it pulls the rib cage up and out this direction. Okay, up and out. And then when they relax, then it pulls it back down this way as they all relax. Okay, so we have internal intercostals too right here, but we're not going to use them for just regular quiet breathing. We only use them when we're forcefully exhaling. Okay, last but not least, our respiratory volumes. So we have volumes and capacities, and our volumes are how much our lungs do hold, and then our capacities are what we can hold. So it's like a combination. Capacities are a combination. Volumes are separate sections within they shouldn't be sections because they're not physical sections, but volumes that your lungs can hold. Okay, so the first one, I'm just going to go from the bottom up because that's what I did in lab this week. So we're going to start with residual volume. Well, actually, we're going to start with total lung capacity. Okay, your lungs have the ability to hold. Oh, and on your list it says total lung volume. It should be total lung capacity right here. Okay, so our lungs can hold 6,000 milliliters of air, 6 liters of air. Usually don't. I don't know a lot of people that have that much lung volume, but 150-pound male, okay? So if his lungs were to totally empty, the first 1,200 milliliters right here would be residual volume. And this is the volume in your lungs that never, ever leaves your lungs unless you have atelectasis or lung collapse because you had a pneumothorax. So this 1,200 milliliters would be found within the alveoli, keeping the alveoli open so they don't collapse. Okay, so this never, ever leaves. And please know this amount, 1,200 milliliters, because that's pretty uniform with everybody. Okay, then the next volume of air is our expiratory reserve volume. And this is air that's held within our lungs, and we can forcefully exhale it, or this is what gets, when we get the wind knocked out of us, this is what leaves, is this expiratory reserve volume. Don't have to remember the 1,200 milliliters because that's going to vary in people. Now, this next volume right here, our tidal volume, is 500 milliliters, and I need you to know that amount as well. So what is tidal volume? That's what we breathe in and out in a normal breath. So every time you're sitting in your desk and you're breathing and you're alive, 500 milliliters goes in and 500 milliliters comes back out. So that's your tidal volume. Then above your tidal volume, you have your inspiratory reserve. So this is when we take a deep breath. This is everything above a normal breath that we can breathe in. And you don't need to know the 3,100 milliliters, but notice it's about half of what your lungs can hold you can take in a deep breath. So we're not even functioning on much air at all, especially because we're only exchanging 500 milliliters every time we breathe in and we breathe out. All right, so now we have some capacities. So we have our vital capacity is this one right here, which is the total amount of air that we can move. And we can measure it. We can take the deepest breath possible and blow it all out, but we can also calculate it. So I also want you to know, how do we calculate vital capacity? It's going to be the sum of your measured value of IRV plus your measured value of TV, tidal volume, and your measured value of your expiratory reserve, your ERV. Okay, all right, and that's it.